Welcome everybody to our Behtini Beginners course. This is the second week, second lesson. And for today's lesson, we're going to be working on a little spelling quiz in lesson 1. And then we're going to pick up where we left off last week, and that is with section E. We'll have some room for question and answers at the end of the class, and you're welcome to ask questions. For those of you that are only doing the class by listening to the videos, if you have questions and you want to send them to me on the WhatsApp or in the Skype message system, I'm happy to try to answer your questions during the Q&A time of this class. Okay, so again, this is our Behtini Beginners course. We're doing Book A, which is the blue book. We're starting with lesson 1 with a spelling quiz and section E for the rest of the lesson. So we're working with both the Tehuki and the Zacholi dialects. And since Katie and Colin are the only ones that are on right now, I'm going to work with the Zacholi book. The Tehuki book is very similar, so no worries there. But since they're the only ones on, I'm going to work with the Zacholi dialect. And we're going to start with a spelling quiz. So if you will go to your section D, then you will see words that we can do for a spelling quiz. This time, let's do the adjectives. So we're on page 6. If you'll look at those adjectives real quick, we'll go over them together, and then I'll give you a little spelling quiz. Of course, you know that the audio recordings to many of these exercises is in your lesson 1, on the first page of lesson 1. Sorry, I don't have it marked real well. And it's right there. Okay, so on page 2, I believe it is. On page 2, right there in the middle, it tells you that a lot of the lesson is audio recorded. And for the Zacholi people, it says Zacho here. For the Dehuk audio recording, it says Dehuk, D-U-H-O-K. And that's where you're going to get your audio recordings from. Right now, let's go to section E. I'm sorry, section D, and look at these adjectives. So I'm going to say it, and then you just repeat it after me silently. Say it out loud, but mute your mic. Okay, so here we go. Adjectives. Rush, rush. Sheen, sheen. Qahwai, qahwai. Kesik, kesik. Pertaqali, pertaqali. Spee, spee. Soor, soor. Khamar, khamar. Now in Dehuk, they're going to say moor, so you can look at the footnote there. Moor. Pivazi, pivazi. Zer, zer. Now, if you've been working with the flashcards from Transparent Language, and you can find all of that information on page 1 of this book, then you will realize that the word qahwa without the I with the hat means coffee, and pertaqal without the I with the hat means the orange fruit, and pivaz without the I with a hat means onion. So there's some similarities there. Onions are kind of pink. The fruit orange is definitely orange. Coffee is brown. So you can see some of the way that Kurdish forms words and that will be a start for you in guessing words from time to time. All right, I'm just going to take these 10 words, and I'd like you to turn to your blue book, I'm sorry, your red book. So now turn to your red, turn to your red book, book B, and turn to Appendix S. Appendix S in your blue book. I beg your pardon. Appendix S in your book B, which is red. And it looks like this. It says that's your answer key. So I don't want you to go to S. I want you to go to V. If you look for Appendix V, you will come to the spelling quizzes. And this is where you're going to write your spelling quiz words. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to show you my mouth, my face instead, so that you can hear me easily. And I'm going to read these words to you. And I'm going to read them from the Zaholi dialect, but when we get to purple, I'll say it both ways. All right, so here we go. Write these words, please. Number 1, rush, rush, rush. Number 2, sheen, sheen, sheen. Number 3, qahwai, qahwai, qahwai. 4, kesik, kesik, kesik. 5, pertakoli, 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 pertakoli. Number 6, spee, spee, spee. Number 7, soar, soar, soar. Number 8 for Zachalis, chamer, chamer, chamer. For Dehukis, moor, moor, moor. Number 9, pivazi, pivazi, pivazi. And number 10, zer, zer, zer. Okay, I'm going to say each one more time. Rush, sheen, qahwai, kesik, pertakoli, spee, soar, chamer, or moor, pivazi, zer. Now go back and look at your book A, your blue book, and check your work. Don't be discouraged if you didn't get all the letters right. It's totally okay. When you check your work, be sure and check your eyes with hats, your eyes with dots, and your S's with the little hook on the bottom. That's very important that you write those letters correctly. And I would encourage you not to write in cursive, but to just print. It works better with flat Kurdish if you just print. Okay, so that's how you can give yourself a spelling quiz frequently. You can use the audio recordings from the vocabulary in section D, and you can just choose a section, study it first, then do the audio recordings and pause each time so that you have time to write the word, and then listen to it again, and then you can check your work. All right, now let's go on to section E, where we left off last time. Again, this is most helpful if you'll do this with a language helper or with the audio recordings, because that's done by native speakers. But for today, I'm going to go ahead and do this for you so that you can get started on how to do it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if everyone is looking at section E, then we'll get started. Okay, so circle section E, page 8, part 1, in your blue book, book A. Circle the word that you hear me say. Number 1, key, key, key. Number 2, sipas, sipas, sipas. 3, bosh, bosh, bosh. 4, ballet, ballet, ballet. 5, uh, uh, uh. 6, mazen, mazen, mazen. Okay, check your work. Here it is on my screen. You can see the words that I circled. All right, now say these words with me. I'll say it, and then you say it after me. Key, sipas, bosh, ballet, mazen. Good work. Okay, now in part 2, circle the sentences that you hear. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay. Number 1, chawani, chawani, chawani. Number 2, khotrawa, khotrawa, khotrawa. Number 3, bkherbachin, bkherbachin, bkherbachin. Number 4, avadrista, avadrista, avadrista. 5, peychush halam, peychush halam, peychush halam. 6, serchova, serchova, serchova. All right, check your work. And then repeat after me. Chawani, khotrawa, bkherbachin, avadrista, peychush halam, serchova. Now you can do this exercise again with the audio recordings. I have no idea which one they chose in the audio recordings. So, you know, it might be the same ones, it might not be. All right, part 3. I'm going to let you do that with the audio recordings. Part 4, do that with the audio recordings. And part 5 and 6, do that with the audio recordings. You know how to do it now. So after you listen to your audio recordings and you write the words, then check your work and then go back and listen to the audio recordings again. Listen, repeat out loud. Listen, repeat out loud. You're going to have every single lesson has a listening and writing section like this. And the answers are all in Appendix S in Book B. So the book you're working on is Book A. All the appendices are in Book B, which again looks like this red book right here. Okay, now let's go to section F. And this is the grammar section. This is the part that you don't want to show your language helper because they may not like it or they may not understand it. This is the part that's written specifically for Westerners. And how we think is different than how Kurds think. And even my language helper, you know, she doesn't always like the way I do things, but I get the right answers. And so that's the main thing. Okay, so we are on page 9 in Book A, section F, the grammar book. And this is almost identical between the Dahuki and the Zahuli dialects. Right now I'm looking at the Zahuli book, but it doesn't matter. Your Dahuki book is going to be almost identical. Okay, so the way I teach the grammar section is simply to read what's here. And I know that's not very creative, but if I just read it, then you will be able to follow along easily, and it will help you to understand the work that you have before you. All right, so let's get started. Kurds do a lot of comparing in everyday life. Don't take it personally when they compare your language learning with someone else's. They will do this all the time. They will also compare people. So for example, if 2 women go to visit a Kurdish woman and she has 2 children sitting there, she'll say to the children, "Who do you think is more beautiful, Aunt Becca or Aunt Shireen?" And I mean, it puts everybody in such an awkward position, but they just do this all the time. So don't let it get under your skin. Just understand that this is a part of their culture. Be careful with compliments. If you compliment something that belongs to a Kurdish friend, for example, if you say, "Oh, that's a beautiful necklace," they may feel obligated to give it to you if it wasn't given to them as a gift. And if you comment about your friend's child, be sure to say, "Khodei we behelit," or "Khodei we behelit." May God keep him or may God keep her after you give the compliment. And the reason for this is that many Kurds are superstitious and they're afraid of the evil one snatching their child away or making their child sick if you compliment their child. You may also notice that sometimes Kurdish parents will dress up their boys in girls' clothes and let them have long hair when they're tiny. This is because they want the evil one to be tricked and to not realize that they have a boy, which some people value their boys more than their girls. So these are things that you will learn as you go through your language learning time. And whether you like it or not, this is the culture. And if you can learn to work with the culture by saying Khodei we behelit or Khodei we behelit, then that will help them to be more comfortable and to trust you, so that when you want to talk to them about something that's important to you, such as the gospel, they will be more inclined to listen to you. Now look at the little cartoon here. So first, Fatima says, or Khalud says, Havin galak ziraka. Khude we behelit. Havin is really smart. And so Havin's sister replies, Khude shtarazibit. And then when she wants to compliment Havin herself, she's looking at her artwork and she says, Ava galak jana. And then Havin herself can say, Chavita Jonan. And this is just the way that they do in everyday life. These are the kinds of things that they say. Now, for those of you that are learning the Tehuki dialect, you will notice that your bit has a hat on it, on the I, and your lit has a hat on it. So that's where you need to listen to your language helpers and your friends there in Tehuk and your audio recordings, because that's a little bit different than the Zahwatli dialect. Now let's go down to part 1, and we're going to talk about adjectives. So an adjective, as you probably know, is something that describes a noun. To make comparative and superlative adjectives, you have to add suffixes. Otherwise, if you just look up a word in the dictionary, like smart, you're going to get like zidak, and that's the adjective. Adjectives are adjectives, they're not nouns. So adjectives themselves never take any suffix at all. They are never modified at all, unless you're making comparatives or superlatives. A comparative means it's smarter, for example. And a superlative means, for example, that it is smartest. All right, so let's look at the chart here. The suffix for comparatives is TIR. The suffix for superlatives is TIR, I with a hat, N. So in our chart, let's just read through our adjectives first. Okay, I'll say it and then you say it. Zirak, zirak. Bosh, bosh. Mazen, mazen. Bachik, bachik. Now, of course, you want to look at your footnotes, and some Tehukis, instead of saying bachik, will say bachuk. And they always write U-I with a hat, K, bachuik, but they don't actually say it that way, but that's how they write it. And since we're going with standard spelling, you got to go with the flow there. So when you're reading stuff like in the Bible, you're going to see that word bachuik, and you're going to say, what's that? And then you'll remember, oh yeah, it means small. Okay, now let's look at the comparative. Let's just look at zidak. We're going to look all the way across the row here. And if we want to say smart or clever, then we'll say zidak. If we want to say someone is smarter or more clever than someone else, we say zidaktir. And then if we want to say that someone is the smartest person, we say zidaktirin. And you simply add this suffix onto the end of the word zidak, and it makes your comparative or your superlative. All right, now let's look at the little comic strip over here. Nadgiz starts, and she says, I'm sorry. Juan starts, and she says, Azirakam. Ballet, Khalud, Nadgiz, Shmin Ziraktirin. And then Nadgiz says, Khalud says next, Az ziraktirim. I'm smarter. That means I'm smarter than Juan. And then Nergis says, Az shahamia ziraktirim, yani az ziraktirinim. Now you'll notice that in our chart, we say you have to add tirin. But actually, look at footnote number 1. It's actually more common to say the superlative meaning with this comparative phrase. The subject, jhamia, or it sounds like shhamia, and then you say the word in the comparative form with tid. You can say it either way, but the more common way is to do it this way, right here. Al-Shahamia Ziraktirim. Does someone have a question? Hi, welcome. I'm going to ask you to mute your mic and turn off your video, please, unless you have a question. Thank you. All right. So let's look and see what this looks like in an exercise. Look at the bottom of the page. So here you have to refer to your chart above to do this exercise. So birsi means hungry. So if we want to say hungrier, then we have to use the comparative form. We simply write birsi and then we add tir, tir, birsi tir. So what would be the way of writing hungriest? We're going to write birsi, and then we're going to write tirin. Then you can check your answers in Appendix S. The red book. So open your red book and you will see Appendix S in the Zahuli book starts on page 80. Appendix S in the Dahuki book starts on page 78. So you simply go to your answer key there in Appendix S and you find the lesson number and the section number. We're in section F. So lesson 1, section F, tells you the page number and it gives you your answers. So I'm going to let you do this on your own and then check your answers. If you have any questions, ask me now, please. Open your mic and ask me now. Otherwise, I'm going to go on to the next section. All right. Then let's go on to part 2, page 10 in your blue book, book A, page 10. And we're going to talk about the irregular verb to be. Now, in the Zaho dialect, that verb is bin biba. In the Dahuk dialect, it's boon biba. For our activity today, it doesn't matter which screen you look at. The to be verb is irregular in the present tense. So what is the to be verb in English? The to be verb in English is am, is, are. So for example, my name is Zana, or I am Zana, or they are Zana and Halut. So this is the irregular verb in English, And the irregular verb in Kurdish is called bin biba. And all the verbs in Kurdish have at least 2 parts. Some of them have 3 parts. When you memorize your verbs, you want to just memorize the whole thing. And this is emphasized in transparent language learning. Unfortunately, in transparent language learning, they wanted me to separate the verb parts. We'll get to this later. It's not so important here, but the first part of the verb is called the infinitive, and the second part of the verb is called the imperative. So in the transparent language app, they have these separated out. But when you work with the flashcards, you can memorize the whole verb together. So when you're memorizing your verbs and you're memorizing the verb for to be, you want to say bun biba or bin biba, whichever dialect you're working with. The to be verb is irregular in the present tense. It has irregular conjugation and it is negated with na. Now, much later in lesson 9, we will get to what regular conjugation of the present tense looks like in most verbs. We're not going to get there yet. We're going to take this in small steps. And for now, just go with the flow. However, if you're curious, go ahead and look at lesson 9 and you can see what present tense looks like with other verbs. Whenever I have a verb chart, my verb charts are always laid out the same way. This is how I lay out my verb charts. I have a subject here, and in this case, I have the blank line, which represents an adjective, noun, pronoun, or phrase. So that's my blank line. And then I have my verb. Now, since this verb actually has 2 parts, 2 options for each way of expressing it, then we have to learn what this means. So for example, if I want to say, I am Shireen, okay, then I'm going to use this right here, because az means I, and Shireen, my name, is going to go right here in the blank line. And then I'm going to put my verb at the end because Kurdish is an SOV language. Subject, object, verb. So the verb comes at the end of the sentence in almost all cases. It's not 100%. So if I say as Shirinim, let me type that for you so you know what I'm doing here. As Shirinim. Here's my name. I don't know why I put a space in there. That's my name. As is my subject, and im is my verb that agrees with my subject, and I must make my verb agree with my subject. It doesn't have anything to do with what's in the underlined part. It has to do with the subject. So how do I know which verb to choose? And this tells you if that word, the one that goes in the blank line, my name, if that word ends in a consonant, you use the first verb option. If that word ends in a vowel, you use the second verb option. All right, what does that look like? Okay, so my name is Shireen. It ends in a consonant. So therefore, I choose im as my verb. And it makes sense because you don't want to have 2 vowels together. Now, however, if my name is then I have to choose the second verb option, which is ma, because my name ends in a vowel sound. So now I choose ma, because that is the verb option that you use for names or whatever that end in a vowel sound. So now you're going to practice with your name, okay? So if you have a Kurdish name, put your Kurdish name in the blank line and choose the right verb. If you don't have a Kurdish name, this doesn't always work real well with American or Western names. A lot of times Kurds will just drop the verb completely. Get rid of it. And you can say as Colin or as Katie. But if you have a, because then it sounds funny to them if you put M or Ma on it. Now you're saying, but I thought you say Navi min Shirina. And so yes, when Nave min or Naveta, my name or your name, when that is the subject of your sentence, name is an it. And so then you use this part of the verb conjugation because it is like ow, first person, third person singular, ow, which means it. And of course you know that because you've memorized your direct case pronouns from section D, hopefully. Okay, so if you say nave min something, then that phrase, my name, then you're going to either use a or ya for your verb, and it depends on what it ends with. If your name ends in a vowel sound like Connie, then you have to use a. If your name ends in a consonant sound like Shireen, then you use a. Nave min Shirina. Now, in the situation with Amy, you're not going to hear the Y. Nave min Amia. You're not going to say Amia. But when you write it, it's written this way. So that's how you do it. All right, if you have any questions, please open your mic. Now let's look at the negator. Somebody says, is your name Becca? I'm going to say, no, my name is not Becca. So I have to negate it. So I'm going to say, na, nave min na Becca. And where does that na go? Can't do it. That na goes right before the name. Nave min na Amia or na Becca or whatever it is. Okay, so your negator is going to go down in red, so it's negated. So if you have a negator, it goes there right before the name. Na Shirina. Any questions? Please open your mic. All right, now let's go into part 3. Kurdish verbs and sentence structure. Kurdish verbs have two parts, an infinitive and an imperative. The infinitive is listed first in the dictionary and is separated from the imperative by a comma. So in the verb bean bibba or boon bibba, bean or boon is the infinitive and bibba is the imperative. It's important to learn the verb as a whole when you memorize vocabulary, not just one part of the verb. Kurdish sentences usually have the SOV structure. The verb comes after the object or adjective in the phrase or sentence. Subject, object, verb. The verb bean bibba or boon bibba doesn't have an object per se. Instead, an adjective, noun, pronoun, name of a person or phrase fills the object position. So look at the little chart at the bottom here. Over here on the left, you see the English. So you know what your subject is. Let's just go across here. So as Shirinim. As Shirinim. I am Shireen. English is not SOV, English is SVO. So it's not, you can't direct translate things. You can't put them in the order of English sentences. You have to put them in the order of Kurdish sentences. Now let's say I want to say, I am fine, because somebody asks me, Chawani, how are you? So I want to say, I'm fine. So I say, Az Bashim. Az Bashim. And then I could ask someone else. Tu Chawani. Tu Bashi. Tu Bashi. So this is where my charts are exceedingly helpful, thanks to all the students who have come before you and taught me how to make my charts. When you start here, you have to go back to kindergarten and stay in line. Do you see this line down here? And this line here? You have to stay in line. And that means your only option for a verb for to or you as the subject is E. That's the only option you have, and you know that from the chart above. E is your only option I would have. Now let's say that you want to say, oops, your name, Naveta. Naveta, I'm going to say Naveta Daoud. Is your name Dave? But it ends in a D consonant, so I'm going to grab the for my verb. And I've stayed in my line. Here's the line. I did not cross the line. I stayed in the line for matching the subject and the verb. You can see this dotted line here. When there's a dotted line, you don't have to match, okay? So, Naveta Dauda. And to make a question, you simply put a question mark at the end. You don't change the order of the word, of the sentence. You just simply put a question mark and raise your voice so it makes a question in your voice. Now let's say I want to add this negator, na. And this na is not na the verb. This na is na. It's your negator. So just like English has, I think we call those homophones, where you have one word that sounds like another word, but it has a different meaning. We have the same thing in Kurdish. Every language has homophones. I could say Navewi na Dauda. His name is not Dave. Navewi na Dauda. Now, of course, you can do the same thing with plural. So here, this is my singular side of the chart. This is my plural side of the chart. So now we're working with we in English. So Chawanin, washing. We are fine. Washing. And how do I know which of my verbs to use? Do I use in or do I use na? Options, do I use in or do I use na? Depends on if it ends in a consonant or a verb. And bosh ends in consonant, bosh. So I'm going to choose the option that starts with a vowel. Boshing. Then, of course, you can ask the question, Hin chawanen. Hin chawanen. Don't cross that line. You can grab it for chawa, but you have to stay within this line to match your subject and your verb. Chawanen. How are you? You plural. How are all y'all? And then you can answer that. We are fine. Or you could say they. They are Dawood and Shireen. Au Dawood ushirinen. Au Dawood ushirinen. They are Dave and Shri. Or Au na Dawood ushirinen. They are not Dave and Shireen. They are Katie and Colin, or whoever they are. Okay? Now, we can also use what we learned in our adjectives chart on the previous page and put that in as a little phrase or as a superlative. So go back over here on the left, bottom of page 10. You could say, tu zirak I. You are smart. Tu ziraki. Or you could say, tu shmin zidaktiri. Tu shmin zidaktiri. You are smarter than me. And the than me is the shmin. I know it looks like zhmin, but in this language, when you put zh in front of min, it comes out sounding like shmin. So please say it that way. Tu shmin zidaktiri. Why do I use the E? I have to because this is my subject too. Doesn't matter which adjective I use. I can use any of those, but I have to use the verb that agrees with the subject. Or I could use an even longer phrase. I could say, Heen, all y'all. I have it wrong. Shta jehel tiri. Jehel tirin. This should be shmin. Please correct it in your book. So it should say min instead of da. Hin shmin jehel tirin. And here you have in as your verb because hin is your subject. Hin shmin jehel tirin. You do adjectives and the be verb. Here's some more examples on page 11. As shirinim, tu ziraki, navitachia, 인차원은 한 번씩 나베위 나다우다. Asmasterinum. I'm the oldest. Now, perhaps you've gone to the market and you've heard at the market, you've heard somebody say, Kimtid? Well, what does that mean? Came means less. Came means less. Like if you do math, you're going to say 7 came 5 equals 2. 7 minus 5 equals 2. Or 7 less 2. But when you add tid onto it, makes it, somehow they say it comparative, lesser. So will it be lesser? Will the price be lesser? And then the shopkeeper might say, Bosha, bula. It's okay, it's good. We can make it lesser. So you can do that when you go to the market and you want to buy something and you're buying a whole lot of things. You can get to the end, the grand finale when he tells you how much, and you can say, came tid, and see if he'll give you a discount. Now, look at your chart in Appendix C of your red book, Book B. Open to Appendix C, and you will find this chart with all sorts of lovely bilingual vocabulary strips put in it. Let me go get mine real quick. Hang on just a second. I thought I could show you the chart in Dave's book with the strips, but I'm not in Kurdistan and I don't have my teaching book with me. Colin, can you share your screen and show people your book B with Appendix C and the vocabulary strips? I can stop sharing my screen.
Yes, just a moment. You want me to share my screen, or can you do it?
Use them, or you can. Okay, now, Colin, your left hand, make that pull the strip that starts with ma. Pull that strip up. Nope, the other one. Yeah, pull that strip up. That's going to show you how to use verbs that with words that end in consonants. Now put it down. Now you're going to have the verbs that you're going to use when you work with adjectives that end in vowels. Okay, great. Colin, pull the third to the left strip up. It says na. Oh, there's no strip there. Okay. So if you don't want to do negators, the na thing, you just ignore that. Okay. So the 1, 2, 3, fourth column from the left is your adjectives. Keep going right